Who-dats, welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
Oh, yeah. The hits keep on coming on your Been There, Done That podcast. I am Mike Nabors, and, we've had a lot of former players reminisce about the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era on this podcast. This time around, we have a current player, and this guy's definitely gotten a kick out of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. He is punter Thomas Morstead. Hard to believe he is the second longest tenured New Orleans Saint along with Drew Brees. So we'll get a lot of his thoughts on what's going on with this team's mindset after the NFC Championship game. And, of course, he has great memories of the Super Bowl and being a mainstay the past few years, a decade now with the New Orleans Saints. Let's bring in my partners. Justin Thomas, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your weekend?
It was good. We did like a scavenger hunt here, so half of the weekend was spent running around doing crazy stuff.
I need a number, though, scale of 1 to 10.
I don't want to give you a number, man.
No number? Right.
It was a 9. It was a good 9.
We ask questions. We need answers here, all right? Shanle, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your weekend?
I got to go with probably a 3. It rained here in Dallas all weekend. My son's 7-on-7 tournament was canceled on Saturday because of all the rain. Finally have some sunshine this week, but it was pretty boring this weekend with the weather. I'm ready for summer.
I'm sorry to hear that. Boy, that Justin Thomas exchange, that was kind of the second most awkward exchange. And, the last one was when we asked Stinchcomb about his Georgia Bulldogs the non-call a week ago. Anyway, moving forward, I was on WWL radio recently in New Orleans. Bobby Hebert has been a mainstay on that show for so many years, and we're talking about our podcast. It's really grown, and a lot of people are enjoying the interviews we've done. But Sean Payton was after me a few hours later, and he had some revealing things to say. And one of the things he had to say was regarding the rumors that he may be the Dallas Cowboys coach. He said, quote, I've got fleur-de-lis tattoos that can't be erased. And before we get to Sean Payton's future, now, Justin, I already asked you about the scale of 1 to 10. A, do you have tattoos? And B, what's your opinion of tattoos?
I don't have any tattoos, and I don't know. That's an interesting subject. I'm not opposed to getting one. I just always felt if I were to get one, it would have to be something meaningful.
Yeah. And
I guess I haven't come across anything worth permanently putting on my body.
That was a much harder question than the scale of 1 to 10, by the way. But Scott Shanle, I believe you have a tattoo. What is your feeling on tattoos?
I'm not opposed to them, although I use my experience of my tattoo I have on my armband. I tell my kids all the time, looking back at it, I wish I wouldn't have gotten it, and I advise them. Yeah. If you ever get one, make sure you can hide it, or like Justin said, make sure it has some meaning, because this thing had no meaning. This was a college linebacker thinking he was tough and he was a bad man, and now I look back, I'm like, it has no meaning. And so I wish I wouldn't have gotten it. I wish I would have gotten something else maybe more meaningful and more hidden.
Yeah, that's interesting because I never knew you felt that way. I always feel like, some of these guys with these neck tattoos, I mean, to me, that's like you don't have a plan B, man. You're all in if you do that. Some of these guys that play sports, I heard somebody say that about a Major League Baseball player had a big tattoo on his neck. I'm thinking, you're all in then at that point because, that's kind of a hard job interview from that standpoint, isn't it? Moving forward. You
better be really good at baseball or football or whatever sport you're playing and be able to set up some good wealth, because it is tough. I mean, it's bad to say, but you watch guys like guys who played in the NBA and now they're doing analyst work, and they try to hide these things, and it's obvious they're trying to hide them, and I'm sure they have regret because they probably never pictured themselves having analyst jobs when they were done playing, because when you're an athlete, you're in the moment. You never think about life after you're done playing.
And those of you who have tattoos, we're not trying to alienate you. I'm not trying to be judgmental or anything, but I think they're becoming more prevalent in our society. And I guess my big question before the Cowboys, though, Scott Shanle, do you think Sean Payton has a fleur-de-lis tattoo, or is he just metaphorically speaking there?
No, if I had to guess, I'm thinking he probably does have one. And I get the question all the time living in Dallas. There's Cowboys fans here who just they are dead set and certain that they're going to see Sean Payton roaming the sidelines. Hey, he'd be 15 minutes away from where I live, but I tell them all the time, Coach Payton is the New Orleans Saints. What he's done there, it doesn't surprise me one bit if he has fleur-de-lis tattoo or tattoos. He's done a tremendous job there. So I don't know if he would pick up and leave that job. The Dallas Cowboys job, I don't think is a better job than the New Orleans Saints job, honestly.
Coach Payton, if you're listening to this podcast, we desperately want you on, but we've kind of confirmed in our mind that you wore the Roger Goodell clown shirt in your press conference. Now we're kind of halfway confirming you have a tattoo. If you want to come on and clear the air, we would love to have you on. That's our goal, to have Sean Payton on one of these weeks. We're going to get to Thomas Morstead in just a second, but let's address these Dallas rumors. You live in Dallas. You hear about them all the time. Sean Payton said it seems like every odd year there are more rumors about Sean Payton getting a head coaching job somewhere else. My take on this is, it wouldn't surprise me, but it would surprise me. I think Sean Payton would be perfect in Dallas. He has that kind of offense, that kind of personality that would be perfect to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. But I also know Sean Payton's a very smart man. He knows that's a sexy job. That's a glamorous job, being America's team's head coach. But when the dust would settle, when the honeymoon would wear off, Jerry Jones is still his owner, and he wouldn't have the same situation he would have in New Orleans, Scott.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I played with the Cowboys when Bill Parcells was here, and Bill's deal with Jerry was, if I'm going to coach your Cowboys, you can't be around. So Jerry Jones, in the almost 3 years I was here, spoke to our team one time, and he was never on the sideline during a game. That was our agreement. I don't know if Jerry would do that again. I just think he wants to be too involved. And you have to Sean's going to be a guy that wants to run things the way he wants to run, and he's earned that right. I mean, if he requested that, he would earn that right, just like Bill Parcells. And I don't know if Jerry would be willing to do that. Now, I do know Jerry will bust open the checkbook to get Sean Payton on his sidelines. And as we know, everything comes down to negotiations. And I think Dak Prescott, and they have good young stars that Coach Payton could get the most out of.
Before we get to Thomas Morstead, one more thing on the whole Sean Payton Dallas thing. Sean Payton has been fishing in the Keys with Jimmy Johnson before. I wonder if Jimmy Johnson picks up that phone and tells Payton, "Don't do it, man. Don't do it."
Yeah, I wouldn't. You know what? I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, the fact that the Cowboys ended that dynasty the way they did. Jimmy Johnson is not in the Cowboys Ring of Honor. I'm sure Jimmy has talked to a lot of coaches who've had interest in the Cowboys job, but I don't see the benefit of Coach Payton, besides being paid a lot more than he's being paid, if that's what he wants at this point in his career. I don't see the benefit of him switching jobs and moving to Dallas and taking over the Cowboys.
All right, without further ado, let's bring in our guest. He's a Texas native. He's a two-time first-team all-conference punter at SMU. And, of course, he's been a New Orleans Saint for a long, long time, a Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champ. They call him the Leg. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome in punter Thomas Morstead.
Guys, how y'all doing?
We're real good. It's NFL draft time. And if somebody would have told you back in 2009 when you were drafted that 10 years later, only you and Drew Brees and Sean Payton are going to remain as the core of the New Orleans Saints, what would you have told them?
Yeah, I mean, that'd been crazy, I guess. I've never, it's been better than I could have thought it would ever been. And, just the way it goes. Just every year, just try to keep making new goals, but it's been an awesome ride.
We'll get to your career and a lot of other components of what you're all about off the field too, Thomas. But obviously, it was a tough way to end the season, losing the way you guys did in the NFC Championship game. But it seems to be kind of the year of the no call. The Auburn Tigers lost a tough one in the Final Four to Virginia, a no-call double dribble. Here's what Auburn coach Bruce Pearl had to say, kind of looking back at that game. I wanted to kind of get your reflection on, what he said and how this team is going to kind of move on after a tough no-call loss.
The biggest point I want to make, and I'm sincere in this, I'm not just saying it's because it's politically the right thing to say. There is human error involved in the game. Kids make mistakes. Coaches make mistakes. Yes, officials will make mistakes. That's part of the game.
That's Bruce Pearl's take. he seems like he's moving on kind of easy. I don't know if Saints fans feel that way. And how do players feel? I mean, you talk to a lot of the players. How are you guys handling it now that we're a couple months removed and the offseason workouts have begun?
Look, I mean, there's a lot of ways to answer that. I would say, when you talk about having a great locker room, that this is the situation that having a great locker room is about. You need to have guys that have growth mindsets, that that are almost, the glass is always half full, and they're going to any obstacle that's in front of them, whether they had control of it or not. It's just the next step in the journey. And I think if you got a bunch of guys that think that way and operate that way, it really it doesn't mean that it doesn't stink that it happened, but it's just the way you attack life, and having a growth mindset of moving forward always. It's just another bump in the road. I like to think it's going to make this year, if we can pull it off this year, it'll make the story that much sweeter.
Yeah, Thomas, I think the one thing that impresses me about the group of guys that you're playing with the past couple of years is nobody thought you guys would be able to get up off the mat after the Minnesota game 2 years ago. And here you were last year, one call really away from being in the Super Bowl. Talk about the differences in the teams you've seen since 2009, obviously being part of the Super Bowl team to where you are now, went through a couple of dry years with maybe a little bit of lack of leadership. But how does it come full circle as far as the guys that are part of this locker room? What's it like going to work with these guys every day?
It's fantastic. I think, being a young guy, I was a rookie of the Super Bowl, and you and a lot of other guys were guys that I looked up to, that did things the right way. When we lost a bunch of leadership all at one time, it really hurt the team. I'm sure the team would acknowledge a few mistakes that were made in their decision-making as well. And, I think everybody just has a great appreciation. A lot of times people don't get the second chance, or they don't get the chance to right the wrongs that maybe happened, because we live in such a short-term world these days. A lot of the great coaches of the past would never have made it in today's world, because they wouldn't have been given that 5-year period to really figure it out. And so I just think there's a big sense of gratitude and appreciation for when you have something that's good, about knowing what's important. I think when we lost all those guys back in that 2012 to 2013 range of time, it was really, I think when you always operate with the assumption, well, we have a great locker room, we maybe can make a concession here or there. Well, if you do that too many times, the assumption that you have a great locker room is no longer valid. And so I just love the group of guys we have. We've got a bunch of guys that are, like I said, they've got growth mindsets. They're always trying to get better, and they're gritty, and have just certain, innate qualities that they're just not going to. It's never over, right? They're always going to be trying to move on and move forward and get better. And it's exciting to be a part of a group like that.
Yeah, I think it's great insight from you, Thomas, as far as just what the locker room makeup, because people don't give that enough credit as far as how important it is to being a championship team. And there's nothing like going to work. And I watch you guys play every Sunday, and I love how you guys congratulate each other, take team pictures together. It's so fun. It's awesome to watch. But I want to talk a little bit about you individually, and I have a funny story for you. I'll never forget 2009. The draft just ends, and I live in subdivision in Kenner. I come out, my kids are playing in the street, and the first thing, neighbors just attack me from the right, left, front, back. What are we doing drafting a punter? Why are we drafting a punter? Because we were 8-8, Thomas. We were a 500 team. We didn't achieve. And I said, I don't know. I just remember saying, I'm just glad it wasn't a linebacker. And they all kind of got a chuckle out of it. And here we are 10 years later, and you're one of the faces of the franchise. I think it says a lot when you're a specialist and you're a face of a franchise. That obviously means you have a lot of respect in the locker room. You're a great leader. When you came out, you were a great athlete. I think, did you run 4.8, 40, something like that at the combine? Yeah. 19 bench press?
Look, that's very nice of you to say. I would never consider myself a great athlete. I was I think, I had a really tumultuous time in college. And because of that, I kind of learned to stand up for myself. I went through some hard times. I had a scholarship taken away from me, and just went through some unique things. I was a walk-on for 2 years. And, I think you really have to love doing what you're doing when you're a walk-on. You have to love the grind. You have to appreciate the difficulties and embrace the tough aspects of it. And it really, I just always tell walk-ons, you better love it, because it's going to be hard to stick around if you don't. And I think all those experiences really propelled me into the NFL. All of a sudden, I was on a team where everything around you is at a higher level, and that just helped me get to a higher level. And I've just been so fortunate. There were so many leaders. I remember the first day I got to the Saints facility, Scott Fujita went out of his way to introduce himself to me. And I don't care if you're a first-round pick or a free agent. There's a little insecurity when you enter a locker room about, are you going to fit in? What's it going to be like? And having somebody like that was tenured, that was respected, come over to me and know who I was already, introduce himself, and make me feel like I'm already in, was really special. And I've just been so fortunate with so many guys like that. When I was a rookie, I had John Carney out of retirement, 20 plus years experience. I had Jason Kyle in his 16th year. And then in my third year in the league, I had John Casey as well, who's in his 21st year. So that's just like 60 years of experience at my fingertips in the first 3 years of my career. And then honestly, being around Garrett Hartley, who had some struggles and made some personal mistakes, and kind of learning kind of not what to do. All of those things really aided in a very fast learning curve for me, which was awesome.
Well, I'm going to just a quick follow up to this, Thomas, because you're being modest. I do think you're a good athlete for a punter, and that's not a slight against punters. I just think you're a pretty good athlete for the position, and they need to let you run with the ball more. Did you play any other positions or any other sports? Were you destined to be a punter? Going all the way back to youth sports or wherever, high school, did you play any other positions besides punter?
No, I did not. And Scott, I don't know if I ever showed you any of these. We'll have to get some visual images. But when I went into high school, as far as I know, in a school of roughly 4,000 kids, I was the smallest boy.
Wow.
To go into ninth grade. I was 5'0" and 90 pounds my first day of high school. So not only was I destined to not play any other positions, I didn't start my senior year of high school.
Wow, that's great for people to hear. I mean, and here you are, a world champion and one of the best punters, if not the best punter in the NFL. That's awesome. Yeah, you can't do much. Your genetics kicked in a little bit late, but now you're here. You're the leg. Nobody can take that away from you. There
it is. And just so you guys know, I know this gets tossed around from time to time. I did not give myself that name. Fun boy Troy Evans gave me that my rookie year at a bowling event on Tuesdays. You know about those.
Oh, yeah.
Well, for the record, Thomas, I'm still waiting on my growth spurt. I don't think it's going to happen at the age of 50, but we got to move on here. I don't know if you know this or not. You may know some of this. It amazes me. You were drafted in 2009 in the 5th round, but 22 slots ahead of you, a punter by the name of Kevin Huber was drafted, and both of you guys are still on the same team. And it's amazing. Both of you have played in 158 games. Both of you have only missed 2 games in your careers. Let me ask you this. How many more punts do you think Huber has than yourself in that run?
I'm going to guess that he's got at least 300 more punts.
Really? It's funny because I couldn't believe when I saw this stat. He has 198 more punts. It shows me really how well this Saints team has played offensively in that run the past 10 years. I mean, I didn't surprise you, but I think that stat would surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, look, I actually saw somebody posted to Twitter the other day and tagged me in it with the lowest block percentages in NFL history for punters, and there were a few young guys that were right behind me, and I've only had 1 block, and so had they, but they've punted 80 to 90 times a year in their career, right. And I've averaged probably 55, and so it was amazing. I said, I'm never going to get any of these all-time records. I could play for 40 years on a Drew Brees offense, and I'll never have a shot at any of these. But that's a good thing.
You always are a good sport. I remember last year when the Saints, you beat the Bengals and you didn't punt, and I actually took a picture of you in your locker like you were sleeping. But you talk about the records; those may not come, but in terms of longevity, playing on a team like this with such a good offense, that should extend your career, shouldn't it?
No, I think that's overrated. It would be different, I think, if I played a regular field position. If I was a linebacker that was backup, that was playing 30 snaps a game on special teams, absolutely that could be the case. But for a punter, honestly, games where I don't play are very strenuous on me because I never get into a groove or a rhythm. There's finding confidence comes with playing. And, Scott, you could probably speak to this. I mean, when you're getting ready to go play a game, I don't care if you're in your first year, your 10th year, that first play is kind of an adrenaline rush, and then you sink into the flow of the game. And, for me personally, when you don't play, I'm doing so much on the sideline to try to find a place of confidence and routine. And whenever I punt 6 or 7 times in a game, I mean, once I hit my first punt, if it's a good one, I can tell you the rest of the game is going to be good. I can almost guarantee it. If I don't punt till the third quarter, it's just really tough to find a groove. So it's a unique thing, and I think the longevity thing is whether I punted 1 time or 10 times in a game, I'm not going to. I'll actually probably be more tired after the 1 than the 10.
Okay, but you have this stare down between Brees and Brady. Who's going to play the longest? Who's going to play longer, Thomas Morstead or Kevin Huber?
Well, that's a great question. I don't look at things like that, honestly. My whole mindset every year is about being the very best in the league that year, and that's all I think about. I think people can get way ahead of themselves with some of these long-term things. I think they're nice to go back and look at after they've happened. But when you're in the thick of it, you better be great today, because what you've done maybe has you a little bit of skins on the wall, but where you're at and where you're trending is all being monitored by every team, including your own. And so my goal every year is to be the very best. The team's paying me like the very best, and so I better be at the very top of the league every single year is my mindset.
Taking advantage of this moment, having Thomas Morstead on the podcast, we'd be remiss. We'd definitely not let him get off this podcast without asking about the most famous kickoff in Super Bowl history, that being the ambush onside kick. And Thomas, I just want to get your thoughts on that kick leading up to it, the week of practice, because I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it. We're down in Miami. We're practicing at the Miami Hurricanes facility. And I remember us just onside kicking like crazy during special teams practice. And I remember saying to Coach McMahon, the special teams coach, and even Coach Payton, they were standing next to each other. And I said, guys, you have no confidence in our team. Why are we working on onside kick so much? I said, we're not going to be losing this game. And Coach Payton looked at me and he goes, this isn't for the end of the game. And I was like, no way you're doing this during the game, in the middle of the game. And so I never thought we were actually going to do it. Do you remember that week of practice, Thomas? And then give us your reaction during the game when they finally told you that we were going to roll this thing out right after halftime.
Yeah, so that year, how it was, Scott. We were 13-0. Everything was great. We were rolling every week, and so we'd put in a fake here or there, but we never ran it because we never needed to run it. We were always winning, and so. Just like all of those other weeks, the week of the Super Bowl, Coach Payton saying, we're going to run this in the game. I just didn't believe him. I mentally did not think it was a possibility that we were going to do that. But I do remember every day in practice, Coach McMahon telling me, we are going to run this. And so one of my mindsets, different than kicking off on a normal kickoff or hitting a normal punt, is that you can't practice it during the game. You can't, it's the first rep you take is the one you hit in the game, because you can't show it. It's a surprise. And so every day, the first rep I took in practice when Coach Payton would call us up to run ambush would be the first rep I'd hit of the day, because I knew I would never get a practice rep. And so anyways, we get into the game. We get in at halftime. Hartley hits a nice kick right before halftime to get us 10-6. And I remember Coach Payton, I heard a big roar from the defensive locker room. "We got your back, Coach." And he kind of busted through those doors and walked right by my locker and just pointed at me and said, "Hey, we're running ambush to start the half." And that was it. And I just remember my heart rate immediately skyrocketed. And I didn't do myself any favors in the perception of the teammates, because I don't take my helmet off at halftime. So I was this young rookie sitting in my locker with my helmet on for 30 minutes, looking like the most tense person you've ever seen. And honestly, I didn't react well to it. I was kind of pissed that he told me so early, but I had such a negative kind of mentality about doing it. It gave me a chance to really be alone with my own thoughts and process everything. And at some point I just said, all right, let's think of every negative thing I can think of. Let's just get it out of my system. And I did. And I remember, you'll remember this name. Frank Gans Sr. was my special teams coordinator in college my senior year. And he was truly the biggest mentor in my life to that point. And I kept a picture of him in my locker because he died the day after I got drafted. And one of his sayings was was ACDC, and the acronym basically stood for the more aggressive team normally wins the game, was the idea. And I remember looking up at him on that photo, and I just thought, well, this is pretty effing aggressive. And it kind of just relaxed me. It made me feel like, hey, this is the right thing to do. And then I started thinking about all the reps in practice, how every time we ran it in practice, I hit it how we wanted. And then all of a sudden, just kind of positive energy started coming over me. And I went out there, and my favorite story to tell is that John Carney every week in practice, or every day in practice, would say, "Hey, Timo, hit this 10%. Essentially, don't kick it too far." And whenever I went out there, he was the last person that said something to me. And he grabbed me by my shoulder pads, turned me around. He said, "Timo, 1%." Because he knew I had adrenaline just flowing through me. And went out there. I don't really remember doing the kick. Kind of blacked out, honestly. And I just think it's so cool that Chris Reese recovered the ball. He didn't even know if he was going to be active that day. And he recovered that ball, and obviously the rest is history.
Yeah, that's great insight that I'm sure a lot of Saints fans love to hear, that moment leading up to that kick. And my question for you regarding the kick was, it wasn't your traditional high onside kick like you see a lot of kickers kick. Your style was actually the first time I had ever seen it. Who taught you to onside kick that way? The little dribble, the little spin back, that's really hard to recover.
Yeah, that was John Carney. Actually was playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2007 against the Saints in the Superdome. And Olindo Mare hit that same kick, but instead of it dribbling on the ground, he basically did like a bending kick, kind of like a soccer kick, where it was in the air the whole time. And he literally did that same kick. It just stayed off the ground, and their guy that was running on their left side of the field just caught it in the air and downed himself. And so we pulled that tape up, and that was, John had said, "Hey, this is the kick that we need to hit." Because we always, if you remember, we always kicked from the right hash, and we kicked it to the deep right corner. So the guy on the left side of the field, as we looked at it, was the guy that was always most likely to cheat and leave early because he was at a disadvantage to get back for his block. And so that was the idea. Coach basically said, "Hey, we need to find a way to get a kick to the left corner from showing our right kick alignment like we had done the whole season." And that's when John pulled that up, and we started practicing it.
Thomas, you mentioned in ninth grade you were the smallest guy. When did you realize that you had the ability to punt and punt well?
Well, at what level? I would say, high school, my whole thing, I went out for the team my senior year was, hey, maybe I could get a chance to play on a Friday night. And I took over those responsibilities at different points of the year for punting and for kicking. And then, honestly, in my last game of high school, I thought it was over. And I had 3 coaches in the office the next week there to talk to me about potentially walking on in college. And so that was when I thought, well, wow, maybe I could do that. And by this time I was about 6'4", 170, still skin and bones. And I really, once I had it as an idea that maybe I could play on a Saturday one day, I really was all in. I had never really lifted weights much, and I started doing that a bunch. And when I got to college, within the first 2 years. I would say by the end of my sophomore year of college, I was roughly 6'4", 225. And the more I was in the weight room, the further the ball went. So I just did that for 5 years, and it carried me a long way. Never could have guessed I'd be here today.
You do so much for the community. I know you've just had your fourth child with your wife, and you have such a great family. For years, you've done the What You Give Will Grow. You've cut your hair to raise money for pediatric cancer. But it's such a small world in the NFL. In the offseason, the Saints acquire Marcus Sherrills, and he's a guy in Minnesota that you've kind of had a kinship with. I remember you had the hit on him in the playoffs, and then the Vikings fans embraced you, and then you kind of embraced Marcus Sherrills in the offseason. And then last year, you guys did an outing over Christmas. Is it amazing he's a New Orleans Saint now? And it must be kind of fun that he's not only a teammate, but you guys have that great relationship beforehand.
Yeah, look, Marcus is a special guy with a very unique story. I mean, he's a high school kid from Minnesota, small college in Minnesota, walk on in college, rookie minicamp tryout player for the Vikings, and has had a 9-year career with them. I mean, that is such an amazing story. And he's one of the very, very elite punt returners in this league that just nobody really knows about him. He had like 6 punt returns of 20 yards or more last year. I think that was second in the league. And every year we've played, he's a guy that I've never liked playing against because I could punt exactly how I want to punt. If that ball's in the field of play and he's got it in his mind that he's not fair catching, and you can't hit him until he does. And he's made some plays against us over the years when I've punted really well. Like, I loved playing against Devin Hester. If I put a ball high in the corner, he was fair catching every time, right? And Marcus is not like that. If he's got the green light, he's so confident in his ability to catch the ball and be quick out of the catch that he can take a great punter. If you put it in the field of play, no matter how high it is, he's going to trust that his gunners are going to keep blocking, and they have to let him catch the ball, and he's going to try to make a play. And so I'm fired up that he's on our team, and I don't have to play him anymore.
Well, you're almost done, Mr. Morstead. But before we let you go, it's time for our last segment. Justin? Morstead's thinking, what the heck have I gotten myself into? Yeah, our last 3 questions, we call it more likely, 3 hypotheticals. More likely, number 1, sometimes special teamers get a bum rap on football teams. What do you think more likely is the biggest misconception about punters in the NFL?
Wow. I would say, I'm not one of these guys that's trying to I'm not in the punters union. I'm not trying to elevate all the punters around the league. I would just say a lot of these guys are just, there's a million ways to skin a cat. There's not a way that you have to do it, right? There are so many guys that are just, they've developed unique skill sets. And there's guys all over the league that can be successful. Some guys can jump high. Some guys can't jump at all, right? Some guys are super strong in the weight room. Some guys aren't at all. But I think it's a great skill to teach any young player because I do think it's something that can be acquired, and a lot of people can get to a pretty good level if they, if they're motivated enough to want to do it. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, that's good perspective. More likely, number 2, I want to ask you this. You're very modest in this podcast, which is, I think, why your teammates like you, and one of many reasons. But you have great kicking ability. If called upon, if something happened, what's the field goal range of Thomas Morstead right now?
I would say, in the dome, 62.
Really?
61 on a field goal. People ask me all the time, hey, why couldn't you be our field goal kicker up until recently? Now that we have Will Lutz, those questions have stopped. But, I've always told people, look, I think I would be an excellent backup. I was a 3-year starter in college. And, I think if I really focused in on it, I could be a bottom of the barrel kicker in the league. but I don't think everybody would like me as much. And so I'll stick with my backup duties. But I do know this: I'm 7 for 7 in practice in my career when Coach Payton's called me up to kick. So I do feel like, though, over the course of time, I would not be a great choice. I believe my ability 100% to get it done in a game if ever called upon.
But before all is said and done, you'd like one shot, wouldn't you? Just to have one kick?
I've already told Coach Payton that. Absolutely. I said, hey, look, at some point I need to score points in this in an NFL game. And the likelihood of you guys letting me run a ball for a touchdown is very low. So I'm going to need an extra point at some point.
What does he say when you say that to him?
I think he hears me. I've been around for a decade. I feel like I've been pretty good to him and to the team. So I'm holding out hope that at some point there's a game late in the season where I think the only way it would happen is if we were winning as far as the season goes, and at the end of the game was over, and we'd have to be winning by a lot late in the game for him to let me do that. But it'd be a pretty cool thing to do.
Well, our last more likely, Shanle can attest to this. So we kind of had one question for a while with players. If you would take a cross-country trip with a former teammate or current teammate, who would it be? And it's amazing. Fred McAfee was a popular answer, so we kind of took that question off the board. So I'm going to ask you this, Mr. Thomas Morstead. You wear number 6. If you could have 6 of anything in the world, what would it be?
Wow.
You ever been asked that?
I haven't. I'm very content these days. I really there's not much I don't have that I'm wanting. I would say I don't know if my wife's listening to this, but if she wants to pop out 2 more kids, I'd be cool with that.
Oh wow,
that's a first. Nobody ever takes the jersey number and goes kids, Mike. They usually go money.
Lance Moore was tempted, I think.
Yeah,
Lance Moore said kids too. Yeah,
he did. Yeah.
I think he had a qualifier with his wife too, Thomas. So don't feel bad about that.
Yeah, she's already given me 4, so I don't want to push my luck. I'm content.
Well, listen, you've always been a great guy to deal with. Such a class act on and off the football field. We wanted to have you on for a long time. It's amazing how the years have flown. 10 years ago, about this time, Saints fans had no idea, but they were about to get the best punter in franchise history. But you're very modest. But I know Saints fans, the Who Dat Nation, appreciate you. We appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And I would just say anytime you guys want to do this again, I've really enjoyed it. And, keep me posted.
Thanks, Thomas. Hey, my suggestion, next time you talk to Coach Payton about kicking a field goal, tell him next year when you guys are stomping the Rams, be a great game for a little redemption against Johnny Hecker, Thomas Morstead making a field goal.
I think Coach is just the type of guy that would resonate with
Absolutely.
him. Absolutely. So I may throw that in there and tell him that came from you.
Absolutely. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thomas Morstead, always a great interview. We really thought he'd be a good segment, and he delivered as we knew he would. Well, before we say goodbye, though, it's time for a little extra, a little lane. All right, Justin Thomas, no scales of 1 to 10. I want to know what your lanyap is this week, though.
All right, guys. For 7+ years, winter has been coming, and this Sunday it finally arrived. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the final season of Game of Thrones started, and I'm very excited, but also very sad that it's eventually coming to an end. I can't wait.
Shanle, you a Thrones guy? Because I've never seen it.
I've never seen it. I feel like I sit out on a lot. I know a lot of people who are catching up on a lot of seasons to catch this last season in time, but maybe someday I'll sit down and watch it. But I just never got into it early on, and now I don't have the time right now to catch up on everything I missed.
Justin and I fundamentally we agree on things, so I'm thinking I may like it. But then again, Justin and I kind of disagree on things too. So I don't know. I heard it, Justin. I heard it takes a while to kind of warm up to. It takes a little while.
It's interesting. I think it's different for different people. I was hooked immediately by the end of the first episode. I've heard a lot of people say you have to give it at least the first season if you don't like it by then. I think it's one of the best shows ever, and I think a large majority of people think that due to its popularity, but you know, it's not for everyone. I'll say that.
Man, we're covering all the bases here on this podcast. Scott Shanle, what was your lanyard?
I'm going to stick with the NFL and just the timing of the way they set things up in the spring. My complaint would be the draft needs to be earlier and release the schedule a little bit earlier. I feel like there's so many obviously the kids need to train and get ready for the combine, but there's such a lull in between the combine and when the draft actually takes place. I'd like to see the draft bumped up a month. And now when these kids get drafted, they can show up to their facilities, to their new homes, and have some time to put in the work for OTAs and minicamp. I just feel like the draft is too late every year.
I couldn't agree more. You know what? They moved up National Signing Day. I think they need to follow suit in the NFL and move up the draft. I mean, it's worked for college football. Why can't it work for the NFL?
It's been a great move for college football. I love the bumping up of the signing day. And the one thing it does by bumping it up, it reduces all the chaos that ensues, whether it's teams pulling scholarships at the last minute or kids withholding their intentions of switching schools at the last minute and putting schools in a bind. I think kids should be able to sign on the line earlier than it even is now and commit earlier, because there's so many games played in the recruiting game and the recruiting business that it's been good for college football. I agree.
Yeah, it's good for everybody, as you said. I mean, to me, it's a no-lose situation for anybody there, besides the recruitniks who sell these websites and just make more money if it's extended a little bit. I love this podcast, and I love working with you guys for a lot of reasons, but one of them is our pre-show meeting takes about 30 seconds because we don't like to really, preview what we're going to talk about, so it's raw once we get on here. And sometimes, I think a couple of weeks ago, Shanle had a lanyap, and I didn't know what was coming. He had Gronk, and then I had Gronk, but I think it's good because we kind of have different takes. I thought you guys would bring up Tiger Woods, and I'm going to bring up Tiger Woods. That's my lanyap. I'm not a huge golfing fan. I'm a terrible golfer, even though I like to play every now and then. But to me, I'm always intrigued by Tiger Woods because you could say there are better athletes in the history of our country, but I don't think grown men have ever gotten excited about an athlete more than Tiger Woods. It's amazing to me. You could be 25 years old, 45 years old, 65 years old. Tiger's winning the Masters. I mean, I've never seen grown men get more excited about one athlete in my life than Tiger Woods. And you know what? I'll watch golf more when Tiger Woods is in the hunt. But to me, I don't know if you guys agree with that. Michael Jordan was great. Tom Brady is great. Muhammad Ali, one of the best athletes. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't around when Babe Ruth was hitting balls out of the yard. But Tiger Woods, he moves the needle, especially in that male demographic, more than any athlete I've ever seen in my life.
I agree. I'm with you, Mike. I'm not a big golfer, but I can appreciate the excellence that Tiger Woods has, and not only his excellence, but how he changed the game. He's one of the biggest faces of all sports for all time, and it's no different than somebody who doesn't like football. They have to appreciate what Tom Brady's been able to do, winning all the championships. They have to appreciate what Michael Jordan did in basketball, even if you're not into those sports. So he obviously changed the game. But to me, what's it been? Was it 11 years since he won his last Masters? I'm attributing all the excitement. I think a lot of people are feeling 11 years younger yesterday and today. They feel like they got in a time warp and reliving their youth a little bit more, because I can't appreciate as much because I'm not a golfer. And I know Twitter was going crazy yesterday with people loving it. And it's also a redemption story, and that's the cool part of it too.
Well, I thought the biggest takeaway for me was him hugging his son and his daughter afterwards, the same place where he hugged his dad back in the late 90s. I mean, you don't see that often in sports, and I may be going way out of bounds here. Here's my last take on Tiger. Listen, all these people who criticize Tiger Woods for his transgressions away from the golf course, you know what? To me, it's almost like music. I like Michael Jackson. I wouldn't hang out with Michael Jackson. I like Prince. I wouldn't hang out with Prince. I don't know if I'd hang out with Tiger Woods. I appreciate people's talents in this world. I don't want to be a judgmental person. They're not going to ruin it for me. Some people, obviously, if you're arrested or if it's a criminal thing, that's a little bit different. But to me, Tiger Woods, I appreciate his story. I really do. I mean, the guy went from the top all the way to rock bottom. I mean, he was like the 1,200th best golfer in the world, and now he's approaching, top status again. For me, I appreciate that.
Without a doubt, he revolutionized the sport. And Michael Jordan, you put Michael Jordan on par with Tiger in basketball. Michael Jordan never hit rock bottom. and then came back and won a championship. Tom Brady's never hit rock bottom, came back and won a Super Bowl in the NFL. And I think it says a lot. It gives a lot of people hope that if Tiger Woods can be down and out, we all saw the picture of him a couple of years ago when he was driving under the influence. I mean, things like that. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but that was rock bottom. And to see him win the Masters, it truly is remarkable and gives people hope who maybe have hit rock bottom that there's a future, that they can obtain something significant.
Exactly. I take that away as well. Well, to bring this podcast full circle before we go, Justin Thomas, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you care about Tiger Woods winning the Masters?
I don't follow golf, so it doesn't mean much to me. I'll say 3.
Same as my rainy weekend, Mike. My rainy weekend and Tiger Woods win the Masters. It's on the same level.
He wasn't as testy with me on that question. I like when we brought it full circle, though. Well, listen, we covered the gamut from tattoos to Prince to Michael Jackson to Tiger, and, of course, a lot of Saints talk with Sean Payton and Thomas Morstead. We appreciate his time a great deal. Check us out. This podcast is on a lot of platforms from Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, and iTunes. We're getting more and more subscribers every week. We're excited about the direction this podcast is heading. We're going to have more and more great guests moving forward as well. So for Justin Thomas and my partner Scott Shanle, I am Mike Nabors. We will see you next week.